Hello again. Grown Black Folks Talk. If the greatest of all time cannot shame and berate greatness out of the players he pays to be in shorts, you can't do it either. Now, for the purposes of this discussion, I recognize I have different generations of basketball fans who probably are among my subscribers. And you may be of the mindset that it doesn't really matter because that's not really a thing. Most of my audience is women. No, Mocha Mommy says it matters because there are a lot of high net worth men who not only play the sport, but watch the sport. And if you are interested in opening your options, it's something you need to pay attention to. So shout out to Mocha Mommy for suggesting the importance of these approaches. But for the purposes of this discussion, we're going to accord to Michael Jordan the status of greatest of all time, all basketball players. Those of you born in the 1980s and who watched Michael Jordan in the 90s are not going to have problems with this concept in general. Although some people had other favorite players, which is fine. And again, shout out to the great players of the 60s, 70s, 80s, and also the 2000s and beyond. For this purposes of this discussion, though, we're going to keep it with Jordan. Concept wise, greatest basketball player of all time. Stats actually show this as well. Pretty good argument for this. But do you know that he has had a terrible time as a general manager and a team owner? I told my mom, Michael Jordan is 59 years old and he owns the Charlotte Hornets. Who? She wasn't saying who about Michael Jordan. We watched that as a family. We watched Joe Montana in the 80s every time the 49ers played. And we watched Michael Jordan in the 90s anytime the Bulls played, even though we don't live anywhere near Chicago. Why? Because he's the greatest basketball player of all time. And my father thought it was very important that we witness this greatness every single time it came on. It didn't matter what other show was on. It did not make any difference. It was not on until the Bulls had won the game most of the time. Occasionally they lost, very, very rarely in the Jordan years. Occasionally they lost, but it was rare. When he was among his peers, he had a reputation. He was someone, according to his own interviews, who would create situations for himself to be enraged because he could convert that into being able to dominate. He also created situations like this for other people, knowing that most people are weaker than he was. So he destroyed people's careers with his mouth. He destroys people's game with his mouth. He used to roll up into other people's locker rooms talking about, I hope y'all are ready for the night. And the person who told the story said, yeah, we actually won that game, but he dropped 60 points on us. So it's like you won, but you still got beat. He used to do stuff like that all the time. But see, his peers, who he led from the field, the compensations of being led by Michael Jordan to victory under victory were great enough so that they could endure the fact that the man is, how do I say this such that this man at 60 years old does not roll up in my house talking about, I took that personal what you said. Let's go out to Golden Gate Park and settle this. How am I going to say this? The man was a jerk. And that's really not a strong enough word. But I'll adjust it when I get to the next part. This worked while Michael Jordan was leading the team from victory under victory. There were benefits to putting up with it. But even Michael Jordan knew that most people could not. The reason he was able to take people and do this with them and destroy his opponents because he already knew that most people can't take this. So guess what happens when he retires and joins, and becomes part of the general management staff of the Wizards? He decided because they weren't doing well enough that he was just gonna go in there at 38 years old, unretired again, and lead the team from victory under victory. And some of the players who were there remember how he talked to them. It didn't work. It didn't work. Now, even in his old age, by basketball standards, even with some injuries, Michael Jordan was still playing amazing basketball. Not the Michael Jordan he was when he was younger, granted, but we watched some of those games too. But the team did not get any better because one thing you're not going to do is shame and berate greatness out of people. You have to lead and guide that. Not even the greatest of all time can do that. The Bobcats and the Hornets. The reason that this video happened today is because I just saw this video for the first time. The Charlotte Bobcats is the only team where the majority owner is African American, and that African American is Mr. Michael Jordan. He's a billionaire, but he can't. He talked about, I have to live. Let me back up one more time. Something about Michael Jordan that you need to know. When he was interviewed at 50 years old, there were a couple of things going on with him. When he went to the Hall of Fame, he told people, you think I'm kidding, but I'm telling you, don't be surprised if I come back and suit up at 50 years of age to go play some more basketball. And when he did his interviews around that time, he said, basketball, I think about it all the time. I wasn't kidding. I obsess about it in my mind. I'm my own worst enemy. Basketball has been my refuge. It's been my joy, my refuge. I thought about that. And then in another interview, he said when he made 50, he thought I'd never live to see it. You have to consider the greatest of all time basketball player struggling. And of course, if you know the life story of Michael Jordan, you know that it was a struggle. But he, with minus that talent, he's every average black person that ever lived that grew up in a tough neighborhood who saw a lot of people die in front of him. His father died a relatively young man too. His story and average black man's story is similar. And there are a lot of other similarities, unfortunately. But I'm not mentioning that to judge him because he found a way to overcome that. Temperamentally, he can take insults and he can take rage and he can turn it. And he could do that because he was the greatest basketball player ever. Most people can't. So this particular video, he got mad at the Bobcats. Now, you have to understand something about the Charlotte Bobcats. They have the record for winning the fewest games in all of NBA history. They rolled out there not too long after Michael Jordan got ownership and won only 7 games. The name of the documentary is The People You're Paying to Be in Shorts. Because there was an interview about how he was talking about, I have to live vicariously through the people I'm paying to be in shorts. You are the greatest of all time, and you are saddled with the worst basketball team in the NBA. And you are the greatest of all time, and you cannot convert it because the fact that you convert abusive behavior on yourself and on your peers, you cannot convert that to motivating the generation of your sons and of your grandsons at this point at 59 years old. No one can, not even the greatest of all time. Now, I will say this about Mr. Jordan. He's still growing because he said, I've had to learn something that I really isn't a part of me. I've had to learn patience. One of the reasons he's greatest of all time because Michael Jordan is still learning, and he's only 59 years old. He may figure this out. Don't know. But the reason it doesn't convert is because you have all these younger players talking about how this man straight up disrespected them and then came on the court and straight up disrespected them. But that didn't make them into great basketball players. That's not how that works. The Bobcats did make it to the playoff that year because Kevin Jackson was an amazing basketball player. But did their greatness endure? They changed their name back to the Hornets. Remember what my mother said about that? The Charlotte Hornets. Who? I didn't even know they had a team. The team owner is the greatest of all time basketball player. They are that pathetic that even having Michael Jordan as their owner does nothing for their respect in the rest of the country at all. Because you can't get there from here. Why have I told you this long story? When I look at how we behave, I'm watching this whole thing with Deion Sanders. I'm looking at some situations online, and I'm just sitting up here like, oh, we really think we're going to shame and berate ourselves into greatness. Now, men don't respond well to this in the main. Women certainly don't. So we're going to sit up here and we're going to shame and blame and carry on and talk smack about, and supposedly that might make us feel better about who we think we are. But like I said before, people forget sometimes. It's like the Eddie Long problem. Eddie Long preached harder against homosexuality than any black minister in Atlanta in the Atlanta area in Georgia, where 4 young men can tell you that he was preaching against the shame he felt about himself. Like I said, people are out there with their receipts. The ink is not even dried on the receipts. The only thing running faster than that ink down the page is their mouth. And this is why it catches up with you after a while. Some of you know, you have seen it. You have seen me do it in writing. You have seen me do it in person. You haven't seen me do it in person, but there are some business owners in the San Francisco Bay Area whose careers, who had trouble, whose employees had their careers ended, who had their plans for this and that ended. They ran up against me on the wrong day, and all that stopped. I can read you for absolute filth. I can mess your life up with my mouth. You know why I don't do that much of that? And one of the reasons I left one of the situations where I had to do it regularly? Because again, and even when I do that in context of the people that I have had to encounter made themselves enemies of the community. If you come at me like that in San Francisco, in the Bay Area, you trying to rip my folk off? Yeah, you might get ripped up. I may have to hurt you. I may have to destroy you. I may have to wreck your life. I may have to wreck your job. I may put on all my different investigator hats and wreck your entire life in terms of your business life being around here. I may have to do all that. I may have to destroy you. But Black people in trouble are not my enemy unless they make themselves such. So even when I have come online and I have critiqued people pretty severely, I also strive to be fair and to not strip people of their humanity. If you bring me messed up facts, look. If your receipts are Googleable and you wrong and you didn't bother to do that, that 5 seconds that you didn't spend by being loud, proud, and ignorant, you're gonna be sorry about that 5 seconds for a significant portion of the rest of your day. But I'm not going to attack people's humanity. I will try to appeal to people out of our shared humanity. Why? Because even though sometimes people need to be reminded, you got to come correct, you cannot shame and berate and dehumanize and degrade people into growing. You cannot get them into greatness. So if you're interested in people actually striving, if you want your children, your grandchildren, your peers, even your elders, especially your elders, and your community to move forward, you cannot shame and berate them into doing that. Even the greatest basketball player of all time learned a very hard lesson. 2 decades of humiliation at this point. Imagine being Michael Jordan and you can't get the Wizards, the Bobcats / Hornets any better than what they were. Even going onto the court for the Wizards and showing up for the practice for the Bobcats when they were the Bobcats and they still have this record. Because if it does not work for Michael Jordan, guess what? It's not going to work for you. Please understand this. As you go into 2023, you are absolutely wasting your time coming online, going into pulpits, and telling people they this and they that, they this and they that. From a Christian perspective, the other thing that you do is you drive people into the arms of Satan, because what Satan goes in and does, see, you can't be saved anyway. God's supposed to love you, and he's already written you off, because see, listen to Deanne. She done written you off. She done basically sat up there and said that you can't be saved because you doing this sin and that sin, and this is all you're doing, and you need to do this, and you need to do that. So you just stay over here with me because at least I have some pleasures of sin for a season. That's what happens in the background. Y'all don't realize that, but that's what people do. The other thing to recognize, I'm part of the Abrahamic religion group, if you will. Judaism, Christianity, Islam. Can't speak that deeply on the Quran. It's organized quite differently than the Bible. But I do know that all three of these books, well, the Jewish Bible, which we refer to as the Old Testament, the New Testament and the Quran, I do know that there are a lot of positive commands in there. In other words, you're not just told thou shalt not, you are given positive commands about thou shalt, and your community is commanded to support you. What I notice happening in the Black community is that we have all this stuff telling people what they're not doing right and what they need to do and what they have to do and all this. We don't put so much energy into that. Where's the support for people to do all this? At least Michael Jordan paid folks to be in shorts. Most of us can't do that at all. We don't get out here in our public platforms and flap our gums about what people need to do. And then we're going to leave it right there. And it made us feel better thinking we're better. But like I'm going to keep saying, because there are a few of you out there who need to understand, just know that I know. Folks' receipts are out here, and the ink on their receipts is the only thing running faster than the ink. The ink is so wet that the only thing running faster than that ink down that receipt is their mouth. I've now said that a bunch of times. I need y'all to know I know. That's who it's for. That's for who it's for. And if I know, like I said, some things are Googleable. Some things are Googleable. It's time out for all this. Because the other thing that you need to realize, I did a previous video and kept it light and bright. What if the recession, you get a Uno reverse card on the recession and you come into a windfall next year? The other flip side of this is everybody ain't gonna get that card. All of putting down other people in the world is not going to lift you up. So some of us are gonna come out there and we ain't gonna be ready. And see, when a whole lot of people aren't ready, when resources are scarce, when people under stress, not knowing whether they're gonna survive, things that people would have let pass the year before are not gonna pass in 2023. And I don't know if you've noticed what the stats are in the Black community. 29 deaths a day. That was 2020's numbers. We know that they went up in 2021, and we should probably suspect that they're at least that level 2022. We won't know for a little while into next year. 29 times a day, we play around online, berating and shaming and carrying on in a community where people kill each other to solve their problems every day, down into their teens. Folks are not even getting a chance to even live their life before they're getting shot and the person doing the shooting has destroyed theirs, all the way down. These are the situations in which we think we're gonna diminish people and get away with it. Even Michael Jordan, the greatest of all time, found out that doesn't work. I always look at it this way. If the greatest of all time can't do something, that's probably going to be enough for average people like myself. If Michael Jordan can't get away with it in terms of leadership, I probably can't either. And I don't think you might want to consider whether you can either. Well, I'm not just some dumb athlete. I do this and I do that. No, you'll find out. Because becoming the greatest of all time at anything is not just a question of just being some black male athlete. No, there's a mindset, there's discipline, and a lot of us don't have that level of discipline. So when Michael Jordan left that, was still mad when he finished beating up on his first team starters. He walked out, and before he left, he took the ball and just dunked it to just show him that he still could. That tells you the level to which that man's disciplined. He's still keeping his body up. The discipline of that man and the mindset of a competitor, that has nothing to do, that's from his humanity. That's not diminished in any way by whatever bigotous thing, that's not a word, but we're going to use it today, whatever bigotous thing comes into people's minds when they think about athletes. The mindset and the discipline of people who are successful is very similar. You can learn from it, but you must also learn its limitations. If people who have the mindset and discipline for massive success find out when they become leaders that shaming, blaming, and berating is not going to do it for them, then it's not going to work for you either. And if you study the truly great leaders of history, whether you agree with what they led or not, the reason that you know the names of more Confederate generals than you know the names of two generals from the Civil War, and they were the two greatest leaders. And Grant was slightly superior and beat Lee, who was the other none whose names you know. Grant had superior resources, but he also knew how to use them in a superior way. The 5 generals who came before him, he had superior leadership. I mean, he had superior resources. They didn't have superior leadership. But you know them because they're the 2 greatest leaders. They were able to inspire their men to do what was necessary. Grant to come to victory, Lee to get a surrender done, so that Juneteenth could actually happen. You need both men to get this done. And their leadership allowed for it to happen. Skill in the field, we can argue about that. But look through history and you'll find this out. The greatest leaders inspired. The greatest leaders did what was necessary. One of the things that makes the story of Deion Sanders so sad is that he gave back half his salary, took his own money, built things for the players at Jackson State. He did everything he could. However, the leadership of Jackson State was not on that level. And there ended up being a clash. Y'all can go look this up on your own time. But I'm just talking about there's a reason certain leaders are revered and certain leaders are not. Great leaders are generous in doing what is necessary to build up their people. Shaming, blaming, and berating is the most selfish way to motivate people imaginable. And this is also, it does not resource anyone. And this is why it fails, given long enough, every time. Unless there is an exception, temporarily, because it worked for the Bulls, but it didn't work for the Wizards. The Bulls had a fantastic coach. Perhaps you've heard of Phil Jackson. He was the actual leader. So that helped. And again, putting up with the fact that Michael Jordan was frankly abusive in the way he talked to many people, had benefits because of that combination. It never worked again. So even when you think you're getting away with it, there's probably other elements that are compensating people. If that element disappears, your receipt's gonna have its behind uncovered, flapping in the wind and smelling. As we go into 2023, I want you to, I thank you if you took your time to go through this. This was a long journey, but I need you to understand it. If you don't know, if your self-talk to yourself is shame-based, you want to do some, I'll put some resources in the description for you. Life coaching, therapy. You want to get over that for yourself so that you don't pass that on. Because believe me, it may work for you. You're not going anywhere with that. Anywhere you want to go. And as Black people, if we want to see ourselves succeed, we have got to change the way we communicate with one another. Lead, guide, support, resource, nurture. This is what we have to begin to talk to each other about so that we can access the greatness that is available. But if we're going to shame, blame, and berate, we're going to stay right where we are and actually slide back. Because again, if your mind isn't right, even if prosperity should come your way in 2023, you sit up here and all these echoes in your head of all these people that talk bad about you, and you have that self-talk with yourself, you're not going to do anything with that. If you're so busy shaming and blaming and berating someone else and getting off on that, opportunity is gonna walk right by you because some things are not for people that are just sitting up there in their pride talking down on folks. Some things are for people that are ready to help people build up only, and you will never see them. You don't have to be the greatest of all time to be a good leader, to be of help, to be of service to the people. You do have to learn how to get out of shame-based, blame-based, abusive conversation. All right. Y'all have a good day now. It was a journey. So if you're still here, thank you for listening. Goodbye.